51 weeks into our Stoic lessons from a handbook for new Stoics. This is where we put it all together. The previous 50 weeks, this is when we step into our role as Stoics and we live as Stoics. Welcome. We are Painted Porch Strategies. What are we?
We are a training and advisory company dedicated to helping you and your businesses create more mindful, resilient employees and teams through your mindset, communication, and effective teamwork.
And it's a lot based in these Stoic principles, which we are living 51 weeks in. That right there is Amy Ack, the founder, the CEO of Painted Porch Strategies. Over there, our Chief Joy Officer, Sierra Ram Cantrell. My name is Rob Hunter, the MC here at Painted Porch Strategies, the master of communication. So Sierra, the title of this is Pay Attention to the Right Things. What was your main takeaway in going through this? And I want to show you the quote from Epictetus. The blue that you can see, that's the quote from Epictetus that they had us read this week. So it was,
but there's more on
it was rather lengthy. But this is what happens when you get deep into Stoicism. The quotes get longer, the lessons get longer, but it's awesome.
That's right. It's a long, this is Amy's jam when it's a long Greek quote, but I have about 1,000 stars next to, we must remember who we are and by what name we are called, and we must try to direct our acts to fit each situation and its possibilities. And I love the simplicity of remember who you are. And when they say by what name we are called, it's almost like remember your role, like remember your job, right? So that it's like, remember who you are, stay authentic to yourself, and then try to direct your act or your reaction the best way that you can. We all know life is never perfect. We all know life is never like we plan it, but it's how we act that defines our Stoic virtue.
And I love the roles part because it's so important, Sierra, because your role is different every situation. And that's what they point out. So my name is Rob, but they say, okay, great. Your name is Rob. But in this situation, Amy and Rob, I am the role of husband. However, we want to define that role as husband, whatever we decide that my duties as husband should be, Amy as wife, and then the three of us as Painted Porch Strategies core team. So we each have our role. So obviously Sierra is our mindfulness guru. I do the communication and Amy does the teamwork. So we've defined our roles in that way. And then you can extrapolate that out. So in your parents' relationship, you have a relationship with your parents. What role are you? Okay, son, daughter, but what does that actually mean? And to live in that intention is what makes all the Stoic difference. Amy, what about you? Pay attention to the right things. What are the right things to pay attention to?
Ooh, so some of the right things are you behaving or are you acting in a virtuous way? Are you showing up, as Sierra, to your point, as your best self? Or are you assigning some automatic judgments to others and letting that influence how, in fact, you are behaving, reacting, responding, engaging, and so on? You know, I loved this because it made me think a lot about all of our programs, but I'm going to talk about mine for a minute specifically, which is creating extraordinary teams. When we talk about teams, and we mention this a lot, it's not just teams for work. You are on so many teams, as Rob just talked about. There's a family team, there's a relationship team, there is a work team, there's friend teams, there's church teams, there's all these different teams that you are a part of. And it's so critical. And one of the things that we take a lot of time to focus on is getting really clear on what your role is within each of those teams in order to make them great.
Not as to defined them, by your title, right?
Right, not your title, but who you are and how you are showing up and serving in that team to make it extraordinary. So I loved this. I did a little happy dance here when I read about this. I loved it. Those rules for living. And when they say rules, they don't mean rules. They really mean guidelines. The Stoics are not, they're not rules people. They are follow certain ethics and rationale and logic and compassion. Those are the things when they talk about rules per se.
And
Yeah,
that's what
and
I
they
would.
laws
Sorry, go
of
ahead.
nature. Talk
Yes.
about
Yes.
the laws of nature as the rules, right? So understanding what things are in its nature.
Yep.
And what are those rules of nature? Is it up to us to define them for our individuality, or are there some Stoic rules of nature that they discuss in this chapter?
Oh, well, there are some core Stoic rules of nature. And the number one, which is again talking about this teams and roles, is that we are made for each other. We are here to serve and support one another. A couple weeks back, there was a quote from Marcus Aurelius where he talked about a cosmopolis. And basically the whole idea is that we are all part of the same universe. And so we are all equally responsible to ensure that all of us are doing well, right? Not necessarily financially, but we're all doing well. We're all flourishing and prospering in a virtuous way.
Well, and there's also another law of nature that I've noticed from the Stoics is that no person, they say man, that no person means to do poorly. It's there, everyone is trying their best within those limitations of what they have. So if you understand that nobody's trying to be the bad guy, nobody's trying to screw up, right? Everybody's trying their best in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important because that's what the title of week 51 here is: pay attention to the right things. That's a perfect example that Sierra just brought up, is that if you remind yourself throughout the course of your day, when you come across, what's the other Marcus Aurelius quote? And he's one of the gurus of Stoicism, probably the most quoted because he was the emperor. He was in that position of power, but showed restraint. But going back to those Stoic lessons of what's taught is that the idea that there are going to be people you're going to encounter during your day that are going to be grumpy, that are going to be jerks. And you know this and remind yourself throughout the day constantly. But if you remind yourself on top of that what Sierra just said, the pro-social idea that the Stoics shared is that we are ultimately a team. Human beings are meant to work together, to collaborate together. And at some point, we're going to have to, whether it's a climate issue that we're going to have to figure out how to solve, whether it is getting off this rock because the sun's going to explode, aliens, who knows? At some point, we're going to have to figure out how to put our differences aside and do it. But that starts as individuals, is what the Stoics say. So if you start that, and you go back to what Sierra just talked about, the dichotomy of control, you know what you're in control and what you're not. And you're like, okay, and you know that we're supposed to be collaborating as human beings, even with grumpy jerks. And if you remind yourself of that, you will approach a given situation, even if it's one that makes you uncomfortable, a lot differently than you would maybe a year ago before you started your Stoic lesson.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Any other thoughts?
Well, there was one other thing. Actually, there was a few other things, but I just want to further emphasize that the idea of what's within your control is really the core of what Stoicism focuses on. And they talk about here in the quote, no one can control another's will. I myself alone have authority over myself. And I think that is a great mantra, as you talk about, Sierra, a great mantra or a great reminder to constantly repeat to yourself, because it brings that awareness back to what you are allowing as the Stoics would say, externals to affect you or to impact you. And this particular lesson is all about paying attention and circling back and reminding yourself of what you have control over. I love that they say, where is it here? It's basically that no man or woman has done something well through inattention. It's only through attention and intention that you can, in fact, do better, be better, feel better, what have you. All of that is based on attention, not inattention. Nothing becomes better by being done inattentively. I like that.
It is a good line. It is a reminder, because we all know and we can relate to those moments where we're half paying attention or we were distracted by something. The amount of effort that resulted in that inattention is usually lackluster.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sarah, go ahead. Take us in a little bit more, some of the things that you had takeaways in week 51.
Well, I very much agree with the attention. My family often makes fun of me because when there's a lot of really loud sounds, it's hard for me to pay attention well because those loud sounds distract my ear. So it's like, okay, if you want me to really be able to really listen to what you're saying well, you've got to eliminate the loud sounds, like turning the television down or turning the music down. Amy famously, when Rob is talking too loud, she does pretends to do the volume. She says volume down. So they kind of laugh at me, but I know myself well enough that if I really need to give something good attention, then I need to eliminate some distractions. So they're talking about pay attention of your judgments in everything that you do. Your judgment is how you perceive anything, right? And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about just the facts. We think about like, okay, as a camera would see it, or if you were to literally just think about something from the facts and try to minimize your judgment or your outside perceptions of things. The example was a really fast driver. Instead of thinking, oh, that guy's a jerk, he cut me off, is that person is in a hurry to get somewhere. Like that's the fact. That person is going fast because they need to get somewhere. So if you pay attention to your judgments, then you're likely going to be catching yourself when you start to say, this music is too loud. Okay, for me, it's no longer the music is too loud. It's the music is the volume that it's at. But in order for me to pay the best attention to somebody speaking, the volume of the music needs to go down so that I can focus. Can I still hear? Yes, but my retention rate goes down incredibly.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that's a perfect example of living in Stoicism, which is the goal, right? You learn about the dichotomy of control, and they start adding lessons in this book, a handbook for new Stoics, every single week, so that you can't help but think about it. Because what is it? Knowledge is awesome. It's great. It's knowledge, but it's not until you take action that it becomes effective. So what we're encouraging you to do with us in going through this is take that action. And that action doesn't have to be, you have to move a boulder. That action could be, wow, I just judged that music because it was too loud. Well, what if the other person listening to it is jamming out, having a great day, feeling amazing? They're going to have a different judgment of that music than you. If Amy likes a different song than I do, I'm going to judge it a different way than she is. So who's right, who's wrong? And I think that's that. The Stoicism, I want to piggyback on your driving examples here. This is you getting in the driver's seat of life, not being a passenger seat. You're like, okay, life is happening now for me, not against me, not outside of my control. And if you start thinking about these things often, you're gonna notice opportunities to be more in control, to say, no, I'm in the driver's seat. I get to control how this outside factor affects me or this person's behavior affects me. That's what I so love about this lesson. I want to read a quote, part of the Epictetus novel that we read in this week. Do you not realize that when once you have let your mind go wandering, you lose the power to recall it? I just liked the way that says, so your mind is off. The further it goes away, the harder it is to pull back. So it's the idea of living with intention, living in the driver's seat, not the passenger seat.
I was just going to say, I think my final thought here is that it all comes back to ultimately, you are the one who has the power and control of how you choose to react, how you choose to receive information, and the judgments that you apply to it. You know, they even say here, the buck stops with you. So if someone is being a jerk, you can choose, you ultimately have the choice. You can choose to let that person's jerkiness affect you, or you can see it for what it is, see that they are behaving this way because of X, Y, and Z, because of the way they were raised, because of fear, whatever it may be, taking that moment and just separating their behavior from how you're choosing to take it in or not. So I think that's the big key here, is that you are ultimately in control. You exercise the dichotomy of control, and anybody else's desires, behaviors, etc., that's theirs, not yours. And then remembering your role. remembering the roles that you play in any situation, in any environment, with any teams, the role that you play, and whether or not you're playing that role virtuously or you're just dialing it in. You're giving it your attention.
Sierra, final thoughts. I love that, by the way. It's very good.
I do too. That was so well said. I would just say ditto.
Yeah, like we say in all of our programs, and I say specifically in my teams one, great teams are formed with intention. They don't just happen by circumstance. So whatever
so does great individuals.
Whatever you want in your life, you're only going to get it by paying attention and giving it your intention.
But see, that's where the freedom comes in. Freedom from your past, freedom from your story. Some of the things that Sierra talks about in Radical Mindfulness, her mindfulness program available for you here at paintedporchstrategies.com. It's awesome. You're going to love it because it does get you on that path to freedom. And a lot of these Stoic principles are in that course, in my course, Master Your Message, which is formed around communication, but it has a lot to do with mindset as well. And then Amy wraps it up, like she just said, with teamwork. That's what we're here for, because we're in this journey. This is part of our life now. We are in the driver's seat for the most part, but we know that it's always going to be work. But that's what's fun about it. You accept it as, ooh, this is a journey to becoming a better person, to be more in control, to be the driver in your own life. That's why we're here doing this with you, to live with intention, to know our roles, but to bring it every day in every situation.
Yeah, that
is a life worth living, as the Stoics would say. So until next time, the last week ahead of us next week, week number 52, wrapping it all up. Apply the dichotomy of control from dawn to night. Sierra's going to lead us in that one. So we will see you right back here next week at Painted Porch Strategies. For Sierra, for Amy, I'm Rob. Look us up. We'd love to work with you to implement some of these strategies and the other strategies that we have developed as a team and as individuals. We know they're going to help you. So go to paintedporchstrategies.com. Come on in and say hi. Till next week. Cheers.